Individuals such as Chauncey Billups, Damon Jones, and Terry Rozier were taken into custody today. Former, current NBA players and coaches. What you don't know is that this is an illegal gambling operation and sports rigging operation that spanned the course of years. The FBI led a coordinated takedown across 11 states to arrest over 30 individuals today responsible for this.
A sports commentator accusing a sitting president of using the FBI as a weapon is not something we hear every day. But that is exactly what just happened. Stephen A. Smith, one of the loudest and most recognizable voices in American sports media, has thrown himself into the center of a political firestorm by saying President Donald Trump is using federal power to punish the NBA. Within hours, the head of the FBI himself, Kash Patel, went on national television to call that idea the single ridiculous thing he had ever heard. It was an extraordinary moment that pushed a sports scandal out of the entertainment pages and into a confrontation between political power and media influence. What began as a story about gambling arrests is now something much bigger, a debate over whether the White House has crossed into the locker room.
But we begin with a story that has dominated the headlines. The FBI announced on Thursday that two major operations, one involving the sharing of insider information for betting on NBA games, and the other centering on rigged poker games using high-tech cheating devices, have led to the arrest of more than 30 suspects, some involved.
We all saw how fast it escalated. On the morning of October 23rd, Stephen A. Smith was live on ESPN's First Take when he warned, in a tone that was both cryptic and defiant, that Trump is coming. He was responding to news that the FBI had unsealed indictments connected to illegal betting and mafia-linked poker games involving NBA personnel. 34 people were arrested that day. Among them, Portland Trailblazers head coach Chauncey Billups, Miami Heat guard Terry Rozier, and former player Damon Jones. It was one of the most sweeping sports corruption cases in decades, but Smith told viewers this was not about gambling addiction or insider wagers. It was about retaliation, about a president who, in Smith's words, doesn't mind inconveniencing his enemies. Almost immediately, Patel struck back. Appearing on Fox News, the FBI director laughed at the notion that politics guided federal raids. "I'm the FBI director," he said. "I decide which arrests to conduct and which not to conduct." Then came the line that changed the conversation. He called Smith's theory the single ridiculous thing I've ever heard out of anyone in modern history. For an FBI director to respond personally to a television commentator was unheard of. The Bureau almost never comments on speculation, let alone insults it on camera. But Patel's words turned a sports opinion into a national headline. Suddenly, every news cycle was looping the clip of him dismissing Smith's claim. And every social feed was arguing whether the FBI had just inflamed the very suspicion it meant to shut down.
Because the entire media is now rigged around a system of the only crimes that are punishable are crimes committed by Donald Trump or his supporters. If you're an enemy of Trump, there's nothing we can't rationalize by saying, what about Brett Favre? Or what about Donald Trump?
Instead of walking it back, Stephen A. doubled down. Within hours, he went online to say he respected Patel's position, but would not retract a word. He reminded viewers that the investigation had begun during both the Biden and Trump years. Yet it was under Trump's second term, right as the new NBA season tipped off, that the arrests exploded into view. He called that timing not coincidental and a statement. On his YouTube show, Straight Shooter, he explained that Trump's long history with casinos and sports circles proved his point. The former president had, for decades, mixed politics with personal rivalries in the sports world, whether feuding with league owners, courting athletes, or mocking players who knelt during the anthem. Smith's argument was that this wasn't a man who forgot old battles. It was someone who remembered who embarrassed him and when. Behind those comments was a real timeline. Federal prosecutors in Brooklyn said that 6 defendants had exploited private team information to place fraudulent wagers, and that another group had laundered profits through rigged poker games backed by organized crime families. But what grabbed headlines was the presence of household NBA names and the suggestion of deep insider access. The indictment even referenced a figure alleged to have shared injury details about LeBron James before games, so bettors could cash in. It was the kind of scandal that might have stood on its own, until Stephen A. told the country that it reeked of political payback.
Simply making the point that in the end, you have a president in place that has a lengthy connection to the sports world, rife with friends and enemies. And those who are his enemies, he doesn't mind inconveniencing one bit.
By October 24th, the story had turned into open warfare between Smith and the nation's top law enforcement officer. Patel mocked the idea that an FBI press conference signaled presidential interference, saying the Bureau held such briefings whenever cases involved major public institutions. But Smith seized on that very visibility, asking when we had last seen a director personally step to a podium over a sports case. To him, it looked like theater. A warning shot meant to rattle a league that the president had publicly derided for years. And the moment Patel went on television to mock him, Smith said, he knew he had struck a nerve. The next round came on Chris Cuomo's News Nation program. Smith appeared calm but unflinching. "I said what I said," he told Cuomo. "I meant what I meant. I'm not stuttering." He reiterated that he wasn't disputing the legality of the case, but questioning the motivation behind its rollout. Trump, he said, was known for using spectacle to make a point. He's not going to forget, Smith warned, adding that those expecting presidential mercy for the league were fooling themselves. We can see how that line cut deep. For Trump's supporters, it sounded like slander. For his critics, it sounded like confirmation of everything they suspected about power being personal.
Not only did we crack into the fraud that these perpetrators committed on the grand stage of the NBA, but we also entered and executed a system of justice against La Casa Nostra, to include the Bonanno, Gambino, Genovese, and Lucchesi.
Meanwhile, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver tried to steer the conversation back to integrity, saying the arrests left him deeply disturbed. But by then, the conversation had escaped his control. Online forums divided sharply, one side calling Smith reckless for politicizing a legitimate probe, the other praising him for daring to say what insiders whispered off camera, that the NBA had been on Trump's bad list since the league's social justice protests and its ties to China. On social media, hashtags split between Smith was right and stick to sports. The debate had become a mirror of the larger culture war playing out far beyond basketball courts. We can trace how every piece of this story fed the next. The arrests brought scrutiny to the league's relationship with betting companies. Smith's warning turned it into a political thriller. Patel's televised pushback made it a national drama. And underneath it all, there were real federal charges. Athletes accused of fixing outcomes, exchanging inside data, and funneling money through poker rooms allegedly run by criminal networks. Yet the headlines were not about the accused players anymore. They were about whether the President of the United States had, in Stephen A's words, given the green light to send a message.
All I'm saying is that if he's salty with you, if he has a reason to dislike you, I'm not saying that delegitimizes the case. I'm just simply saying that he's not going to hesitate to come at you with a level of fervor that you should be aware of. And that's what we're talking about here. But there's another thing that's going on in the NBA right now. And I'm going to tell you something else.
Insiders close to the networks say producers scrambled to balance coverage, aware that every new broadcast from Smith could reignite tension between ESPN's corporate neutrality and its star host's independence. Some executives reportedly urged restraint. Others recognized the ratings spike as proof that the audience wanted more, not less, of the controversy. Every time Smith appeared, his comments were clipped, dissected, and replayed across political talk shows. It wasn't just a sports story. It was a power struggle between the media, federal law enforcement, and the presidency itself.
The first indictment involves 6 defendants. This scheme is an insider sports betting conspiracy that exploited confidential information about National Basketball Association athletes and teams.
And then came the timing question. When Smith pointed at the calendar, he claimed the entire operation landed exactly as the NBA's opening week began, a coincidence too perfect to ignore. 34 arrests, high-profile perp walks, and an FBI press conference, all unfolding just as the league tried to celebrate its new season. Smith called that the real tell, suggesting that the optics alone proved his case. Was it chance or choreography? The audience was left staring at the same question. Is Stephen A. Smith uncovering a political hit job in real time? Or has he gone so far into speculation that he's accusing the president, the FBI, and the NBA itself of conspiring just to keep his own name trending as the cameras roll? After that first blast of coverage, what we were watching stopped being about sports altogether. It turned into a credibility war between three towering names: Stephen A. Smith, the FBI, and Donald Trump. Each played their part with precision. Smith cast himself as the lone truth teller, the voice brave enough to say the quiet part out loud. The FBI painted him as reckless, a showman chasing outrage without evidence. And Trump's inner circle, true to pattern, said nothing at all. No tweets, no statements, no corrections, just silence. And in the world of politics, silence is gasoline. It let the image of a vengeful presidency hang in the air, daring people to believe that, yes, maybe this really could be payback for years of public defiance from the NBA. The fact that no one from Trump's camp rushed to deny it only deepened the suspicion.
Not implying that Kash Patel doesn't have any legitimacy to the case that he's pursuing against these individuals. They are clearly looking for more bodies, and you can speculate as to who those bodies are going to be, and how feverishly he's going to go after those people. The man ain't playing. We understand that. We get that part, okay? And I'm not about to sit up here and argue with an FBI director. All right, I was born at night, not last night.
We've seen this history before. The tension between Trump and the NBA didn't start this month, or even this year. For nearly a decade, league stars have criticized him over social issues and global partnerships, while Trump publicly mocked players, boycotted games, and called out what he saw as hypocrisy. In 2017, he lashed out at teams over anthem protests. By 2020, he was accusing the league of pandering. The rift was cultural, not just political. So when Stephen A. pointed to this timeline and said it made sense that Trump would see the NBA as an enemy, his argument landed on familiar ground. Smith's supporters argue that the revenge theory fits a pattern: a leader who remembers slights and remembers reminding opponents who holds the upper hand. Critics call that a stretch, but even they admit Trump's playbook has always been about spectacle and domination. That is why Kash Patel's reaction mattered so much. Instead of letting the claim fade quietly, he went scorched earth. The director of the FBI calling a sports commentator's opinion the ridiculous thing I've ever heard wasn't just unusual, it was almost unthinkable. We can count on one hand the times a bureau chief has descended into the media storm to mock an individual by name. It felt personal, and the swiftness of it raised its own questions. Why answer so aggressively if the allegation was beneath notice? Some legal analysts say Patel was protecting institutional credibility. Others wonder if his fury only made people suspect he was trying to bury something bigger. Because once the FBI director becomes part of the argument, it's no longer Stephen A. shouting from the sidelines. It's two national figures battling for public trust in real time.
Why are we acting like I'm making this up? I'm going to repeat what I continue to say to y'all. And by the way, just so you know, in the interest of just being real and making sure that you understand who I am as a journalist and a commentator spanning 30.
From that moment, the story began to twist around motive and ego. We started hearing the same question whispered through studios and press rooms. Is Stephen A. Smith doing this because he truly believes Trump is personally targeting the NBA, or because he knows that being the only one bold enough to say it out loud makes him untouchable? In a media landscape obsessed with outrage, that distinction matters. Smith has spent years shaping an image of himself as fearless and unsilenceable, and this confrontation offered the perfect stage to reinforce it. By turning a government investigation into a narrative about courage, he wasn't just defending a theory. He was reinforcing his own mythology.
In a second, this announcement comes just as the NBA season was starting and not only involves a current coach of the Portland Trail Blazers who's accused of being part of a rigged poker game involving mobsters in New York, but in a separate indictment, a former unofficial Lakers assistant coach accused of leaking injury reports to gamblers so they could bet big against.
We can see how carefully he leaned into that persona. He reminded viewers of his 30 years in the industry, of the times he was mocked only to be vindicated later. He carried himself less like a television analyst and more like a man staking a claim in history, daring critics to laugh now and apologize later. For Smith, credibility isn't just about being right. It's about surviving long enough for time to catch up. That's why, even as political commentators called his claims reckless, his core audience celebrated him as a truth teller finally stepping onto the same battlefield as politicians and federal power brokers. In that sense, the scandals stopped being about basketball entirely and became a clash of identities. Stephen A. positioned himself not beneath Trump or the FBI director, but alongside them. Three men commanding their own followings, trading blows in front of the entire country. The president has his rallies, Patel has his bureau, and Smith has his audience of millions. Each understands the theater of authority. Each knows the value of public defiance. And in a culture where reputation is power, Smith seemed to decide that if he couldn't outplay the FBI or outgovern the president, he could at least outtalk them. And in the age of constant screens, that might be just as potent.
We do have more breaking news this morning. Two big names in the NBA among more than 30 people arrested in connection with federal investigation into sports betting and illegal gambling.
Through it all, Stephen A. played the part of the man who refuses to blink. He told viewers that people have called him crazy before, only for the facts to vindicate him later. He reminded them of his 30 years in journalism, of how being labeled outrageous often means being early. It was classic Smith, leaning into the backlash, turning it into evidence that he'd hit a nerve. Some insiders say this is calculated branding. Every controversy makes his platform stronger. Others insist it's conviction, not performance, that he's saying what few in sports media dare to say about power, politics, and control. Either way, he's positioned himself as the only commentator willing to accuse presidential power of leaning on law enforcement to humble a league that once embarrassed it on the world stage. The NBA, meanwhile, is paying the price on both fronts. The commissioner publicly suspended high-profile figures and said he felt a pit in his stomach over the damage to the game's reputation. Sponsors are uneasy. Teams are scrambling to reassure fans. And the word integrity has become the league's mantra. But behind the press releases, there's panic. The same federal filings that name mafia-backed poker rooms and money laundering rings are now being discussed in the same breath as political vendettas. For the first time in years, the league's global image isn't just tied to athletes. It's tied to a government narrative. And that's something no amount of branding can control. We've learned that this scandal has trapped the NBA in a place it never expected to be. Between prosecutors determined to prove a crime and pundits suggesting the entire crackdown is a message from the White House, Stephen A. says Trump isn't playing, that he's coming. Patel says the Bureau arrests people for offenses, not politics. Both are sticking to their lines, and the public is left to decide which story feels truer. Inside the league, executives are reportedly bracing for more names to surface as the FBI widens its reach. And players' associations are hiring legal teams in anticipation of subpoenas. The sense of unease isn't about basketball anymore. It's about power, timing, and what happens when those collide. Now, Stephen A. has become more than a commentator. He's the man who dared to say that the president is using the FBI to squeeze the NBA, and the man the FBI director personally tried to humiliate for it. Yet the arrests are real. The suspensions are real. The timing is real.
If this truly is political revenge, then one of the most popular leagues on earth is being used as an example. And if it isn't, then Stephen A. Smith has just declared open war on the president and America's top law enforcer armed with nothing but a microphone. So what do we believe? Is Stephen A. uncovering a truth no one else dares to touch? Or building a storm just to prove he can still shake the room? Let us know what you think in the comments below, because this story isn't finished, not by a long shot. Until next time, stay sharp, stay curious, and remember, every headline hides another game behind it.